We're talking about phenomenology, phenomenon. When things happen, how do you interpret it? How do you help yourself? How do you help other people as you interact and engage the world around you? Phenomenology. Daniel Berger, you deal a lot with this. You talk about phenomenology. We talked a little bit about it in the last video as we interacted with Jordan Peterson as he's wrestling with his own life and how he's thinking about life and working through these various issues. And so phenomenology, what I would like to do in this video is that let's just go just a little bit deeper in explaining it and the different complexities of it, because it's a word, but there's a word cloud that surrounds this. And so let's interact with it. So give me your definition of phenomenology, and then let's talk about some of its complexity.
Yeah, and we'll continue to use that Jordan Peterson interview just because it's a very recent example of how this is used constantly within, it really is the core of what we call psychology, and I'm not talking about the experimental side of it where there can be objectivity and actual science like studying behavior, but the prescriptive side of psychology, this is just fundamental to it. So in that video, Jordan talked about, again, the narrative versus the objective. And so the way that seculars define phenomenology typically is twofold. The first part of it is an actual understanding of self. So they would say a subjective first-person understanding of your own life, or they would use the word consciousness. You'll see many seculars use the word soul or psyche. Mm-hmm. But typically it's consciousness, and so when you lose consciousness, then life is gone in their opinion. The second is then once you've established what, and that includes what we would call identity, then they say it's interpreting then life around you. So your identity is going to interpret everything that you go through. So in Christian terms, we could just call this worldview, right? It's faith. But the field of phenomenology, and I'm very comfortable using that term. It's not a evil term, or I believe that there's biblical phenomenology. So what's happening now is seculars are listening to that and realizing, wow, the Bible does provide a very clear and far more detailed phenomenology for many of the things they're trying to describe and lay out within the secular view. So I look at phenomenology that way, but of course we're going to look at this biblically. The soul, our understanding of identity is in Christ, which allows us to interpret all phenomena in life through that lens, or what we call wisdom. For us, for seculars, they have to constantly search for all these different dynamics and people, and they're abandoning theories and they're grabbing. For us, Jesus is the wisdom that we need to, first of all, find ourself in. So when fear of man comes in, we're trying to find our identity in other people, as just an example, versus really understanding ourselves in Christ and how He created us, etc. And then when
a person who struggles with fear of man but yet rejects the biblical explanation of who we are, body and soul, what do they go to?
Right.
What do they? That's a question.
Oh. Well, that's a good question.
And I know there's actually many answers to this question, but what would be an example of what they would grab hold to or try to fix this problem?
Well, so we'll go there. There's probably too much for this video.
Just give me what would be something they would do. I mean, medication, right?
Trying to completely dissociate from a person that's hurt them. Bitterness, we see now, especially with internet, people just driven by bitterness, and so I mean, there's a lot of factors. But when our identities are we feel like are being attacked or damaged,
right?
Interestingly enough, that's how all these secular constructs of mental illness, the severe mental illness, you'll see this, a loss of self, right, as a core feature. And what they're saying is somebody did not have the faith or the identity to be able to go through that phenomena, what we would call trauma.
Right.
Trauma is just a way to describe a specific type, a group of phenomena, if you would.
Right.
And so hopefully the listener can see, or the viewer can see, how all this comes together. It really is just central to everything we're talking about, but somehow we've missed it in Christianity, and we already have the answers, and that's an exciting thing.
So we have two people, different people. They're experiencing phenomenon. One of them comes from a bibliocentric perspective, and so they would see body and soul.
Right.
That would be part of their presuppositional worldview. Of course, they'll also have an interpretive lens to interpret body and soul. And then you have another person who experiences the exact same phenomenon. The situation happens to them. They would believe in the organic, the physical, but you call it the narrative, which is one way they describe the spiritual, or
that's Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson, which is what they're trying to understand. This other, now he's given it a label narrative. We would just see it as a non-organic spiritual self, soul, and so forth. They use consciousness, they use all sorts of things, but they're really just grabbing, trying to explain something that they don't have a clear path forward to understand.
Yeah, I am currently working on a project right now, and just been reading just psychiatric journals. Phenomenology is, there's so much that I had to just stop research. It was like within 2 days I had too much material already, and it's because we know that there's these metaphysical realities that we have bought into the secular system. We call mental illness. Again, Jordan Peterson used that word narrative. And so what they're doing is they're saying we don't believe in the immaterial, but we know it's real. So therefore, it has to come out of the material. So what they're doing is forcing, or if you look at the terms they use, is biological reductionism. So we're getting big terms now, but hopefully we can just simplify this pretty easily.
That's my job to make.
Okay.
Well,
it's good for me to do too. But if you take anxiety as an example, they say this is a real phenomena. This is real, which we would agree with. But, and to use again Peterson's words, are this is the narrative. Well, there's no objective way to approach that, but yet they're saying we have to interpret this, so therefore there's got to be a physical cause. So we will find some biological cause. Same thing for this idea of schizophrenia, which again is just a description. This is all part of phenomenology, which I'll tell you, the utility here in a second. But they have to force the metaphysical to fit into this physical.
And then that gives them a path forward to solve the problem
in the physical.
Right, through the physical. And so if I run the soul or the spiritual back through the body as the answer to what is going on in the narrative, then I medicate the body. And so you can alter that. It also affirms the thesis. So you can medicate the body, and let's say the person is dumbed down or altered in whatever way through the medication, problem solved. Therefore, we know that this is the answer.
Yeah, so taking
which
that,
is not true, by the way.
Yeah, so taking that, even the psychotropic drugs are all phenomenological, and by that I mean, if you have cancer, that's an organic problem.
Right. Clearly physical.
Right, and you're taking an organic medicine.
Right.
What they're admitting is this is phenomenological. We have nothing, we don't even know what causes it, but we're going to insist that the body, genetics, the brain, etc., are causing it. But we really don't have any medicine. So what we're going to do is we're going to treat the phenomena. So if you're in distress, we're going to find a way to make you feel better. They call that therapeutic effect. So in other words, and again, this isn't my theory. You can't study psychotropic drugs or psychopharmacology without realizing they admit 100% they are not treating anything. They are actually just addressing or blunting people's feelings.
Yeah, well, we do that too. I don't feel good, and so it's pizza night and binge watching Netflix.
Right.
This is my solution to this problem. We do the exact same thing, which is dangerous, no matter, because there is another answer. Yeah. There's a biblical answer. This is real, soul, spirit, whatever we want to call it here. the non-organic self, and there's also a clear answer to this as well.
That's right. So, every aspect of this paradigm within secularism is clinical psychology, psychiatry is phenomenological. So if you get diagnosed with a label like bipolar, ADHD, schizophrenia, all of those are actually phenomenologically based. So there is nothing organic that you can actually pull out and say, look at bipolar under a microscope. No one's ever seen that. But they've insisted that because they don't believe in the immaterial, that all this fit in. This doesn't happen as much now, but it always, when I first started speaking, I would hear this sometimes. Are you a psychiatrist? And I would say, of course not. Well, then how do you have a right to speak on these things? Well, that's a presuppositional phenomenology. They're saying this has got to be an organic problem because that's what I was told, and I trust this phenomenology. But if you understand that these are immaterial things and there's actually different phenomenologies, that whole argument goes out the window, because why do we have to force everything into a material explanation?
Right.
Well, the only reason that seculars say, and they admit this openly, is because we want to do away with God. The moment you start admitting there's a spiritual aspect, you are identifying the image of the Creator, who is a spirit. And that can't be, because then now we're addressing a whole different animal, which is the biblical perspective.
Right, and watching Jordan wrestle through these things over a period of years, because it's out there, and you see this mental progression as he's wrestling with what he calls the narrative. He has eliminated a lot of things, and now he's starting to look toward the possibility of Christ,
right,
the Bible, God. He has always believed in, or in this stage of his life, he's always believed in a higher power. He's always believed in some kind of deity, but he never would land a plane on it. But now he's talking with the most clarity that he's ever talked about, right, where he's starting to almost give this person a name, and he's looking inside, right, the Christian window, because it appears he's starting to see that as maybe that's the answer to the phenomenon,
right,
that's going on. And so when we come back in the next video, I want you to get to the word cloud that I introduced this video,
yeah,
which is fine. And I want you to take phenomenology and then just start describing a sequential process and just add some words to it so that we can really be clear. Because as we have discussed, we do this.
Right.
We actually do this. Many of us Christians are materialists at heart, and we are beholding the two people that are looking at the same, right, problem. We're not really two people. We come from the same worldview of materialism, yep, and it's not a solution. And we will get to the same place where Jordan and others have gotten to, that these aren't answers, and right, I need to understand this better, and I need a better answer. And so when we come back, the next video, let's talk about that, and so where you can unpack phenomenology in a more deeper way. Thank you so much for watching. This is Life Over Coffee. Daniel Berger and Rick Thomas. God bless.